Dr. Emily Carter did not move for a full second, and in that second the room felt suspended, as if time itself had taken a careful step back. The soft beeping of the monitor continued, steady but no longer fading, no longer slipping away the way it had moments before. Her eyes stayed fixed on Rex's ribcage, watching that faint, irregular motion repeat, subtle but undeniable. It was not the pattern of a body shutting down. It was something else, something interrupted, something fighting to be understood. "Caleb," she said quietly, her voice lower now, more focused. "I need you to stay with him." Caleb did not answer with words. He only tightened his hold slightly, careful, protective, as if Rex might drift away if he loosened his grip. Rex's head rested against his shoulder, the warmth still there, the breath still present, thin but real. That alone was enough to keep Caleb from letting go. Dr. Carter set the syringe down slowly on the metal tray, the soft clink echoing louder than it should have in the stillness. She reached for her stethoscope, pressing it gently against Rex's chest, her brow tightening as she listened. Once. Then again. The rhythm was uneven, but it carried a strength that should not have been there. Not if everything they thought was true. "That is not consistent," she murmured, almost to herself. She adjusted the angle, listening deeper, her fingers lightly tracing along Rex's side, feeling for something hidden beneath fur and muscle. The room shifted, no longer a place of endings, but a place searching for answers. Caleb opened his eyes slowly, looking down at Rex, then back at the doctor. "What does that mean?" he asked, his voice raw, uncertain, caught between hope and fear. Dr. Carter did not look up right away. She moved with precision now, reaching for a small pen light and checking Rex's pupils, watching how they responded. There it was again. A delay, but not the kind she had expected. A signal that did not match the story his body had been telling before. "It means," she said carefully, finally meeting Caleb's gaze, "we might not be looking at what we thought we were." Caleb's breath caught, his chest tightening as if the words themselves carried weight. Rex shifted slightly in his arms, a small movement, but enough to make Caleb's heart race. "Hey!" Caleb whispered again, softer this time, as if speaking too loud might break whatever fragile thread was holding them here. "You hear that, partner?" Rex's ear twitched faintly against his shoulder. It was small. So small it could have been missed. But Dr. Carter did not miss it. She straightened, her expression sharpening with urgency now, a different kind of urgency than before. Not the quiet preparation for goodbye, but the sudden realization that something had been overlooked. "I need imaging," she said quickly, already moving toward the door. "Now." The word echoed with purpose. Caleb blinked, trying to keep up, his mind still catching up to the shift happening around him. "Imaging?" he repeated, almost in disbelief. Dr. Carter nodded once, firm. "There is something interfering. Something masking his real condition. I need to see it." The idea hung in the air, fragile but alive. Not an ending. Not yet. Caleb looked back down at Rex, his hand steady now against the dog's neck, feeling the faint but stubborn pulse beneath his fingers. For the first time since they walked into that room, the silence did not feel empty. It felt like something waiting to be discovered. The hallway lights seemed harsher as they moved, stretching long reflections across the polished floor while the wheels of the gurney rolled with a quiet urgency that did not match the storm building inside Caleb's chest. He walked beside Rex without letting go, one hand resting firmly against the dog's shoulder as if anchoring him to this world, each step measured, careful, unwilling to risk even a second of distance. Rex lay still, but not empty, not fading the way he had been before. There was something there now, something holding on. His breathing came shallow but steady, and every few seconds, his ear flicked as though he could still hear Caleb's voice beneath the noise of the clinic. "Stay with me," Caleb murmured, the words barely more than breath, but steady, constant, like a rhythm Rex had learned to follow years ago. The imaging room door swung open with a soft, mechanical hum, revealing a colder space, dimmer, filled with the quiet glow of monitors and the faint scent of metal and ozone. Dr. Carter moved ahead of them, already preparing the machine, her motions sharper now, focused in a way that came from experience and something deeper, something that felt like instinct. She did not rush, but there was no hesitation left in her hands. "Lift him gently," she instructed, her voice calm but firm. Caleb nodded, sliding his arms beneath Rex with practiced care, lifting him as if he weighed nothing, though the truth was the opposite. Rex was heavy with memory, with years of partnership, with every moment that had led them here. As Caleb laid him onto the imaging table, Rex's head turned slightly, pressing weakly against his arm before settling again. It was not random. It was deliberate. Caleb felt it, and his throat tightened, but he did not pull away. He stayed right there, his hand resting along Rex's neck, fingers tracing slow, grounding circles. The machine powered on with a low hum, the sound building slowly, filling the room with a steady vibration that seemed to echo through bone. Dr. Carter adjusted the settings, her eyes flicking between the screen and Rex, watching, calculating, waiting for the image to reveal what the surface could not. Seconds stretched. Then the screen lit up. Shadows and shapes formed, layers of bone and tissue unfolding in quiet detail. Dr. Carter leaned in closer, her breath slowing, her focus narrowing to a single point. There. Something faint. Something out of place. Not a failure. Not an ending. A disruption. A small, nearly hidden obstruction pressing where it should not, interfering with normal function, masking itself behind symptoms that had mimicked something far worse. Her eyes widened slightly, not in fear, but in realization. "That is it," she whispered, almost reverent. Caleb looked up, searching her face, afraid to ask, afraid to hope. "What do you see?" he said, his voice unsteady but holding. Dr. Carter turned to him, the weight of certainty settling into her expression for the first time since this began. "He is not shutting down," she said. "He is fighting something we can treat." The words landed slowly, like light breaking through heavy cloud. Caleb stared at her, the meaning taking hold piece by piece, disbelief and fragile hope colliding in his chest. Behind him, the machine continued its quiet hum, but the room no longer felt like a place of endings. It felt like a turning point, balanced on the edge of something neither of them had expected, something Rex had held on to just long enough for someone to finally see. For a moment neither of them spoke, as if saying anything too quickly might break whatever fragile truth had just surfaced on that glowing screen. The machine continued its low, steady hum, filling the room with a sound that no longer felt ominous, but almost reassuring, like a quiet promise that something was still working beneath the surface. Caleb's hand remained on Rex's neck, his fingers pressing gently into the thick fur, feeling that faint but steady pulse, stronger now that he knew what it meant. Not an ending. Not yet. Dr. Emily Carter moved with renewed purpose, her hesitation gone, replaced by a calm precision that came from certainty. She reached for a nearby console, pulling up additional scans, adjusting contrast, isolating the area she had seen moments before. The image sharpened, revealing the obstruction more clearly now, a small but critical interference pressing against a vital pathway, disrupting everything just enough to mimic something far worse. "It is localized," she said, more to confirm it to herself than to explain, but Caleb heard every word. That is why it looked like systemic failure. It was never that. It was this. Caleb let out a breath he did not realize he had been holding, his shoulders lowering slightly, though the tension had not fully left him. Hope, he was learning, could be just as heavy as fear. "Can you fix it?" he asked, the question simple, but carrying everything. Dr. Carter turned toward him, her expression steady, grounded. "Yes," she said without hesitation. "But we need to act quickly. He has been compensating for too long." The words landed with urgency, but not panic. There was time. Not much, but enough. Caleb nodded immediately, no second thoughts, no doubt. "Do whatever you need," he said, his voice firm now, anchored by something he had almost lost. Rex shifted slightly on the table, his breathing changing, just enough for Caleb to notice. His head tilted, pressing faintly into Caleb's hand again, as if responding not to the voices, but to the shift in the room, the change in energy that only something deeply connected could sense. "You hear that, buddy?" Caleb whispered, a faint smile breaking through for the first time, fragile but real. "We are not done." Dr. Carter began preparing the next steps, her hands moving quickly but with care, gathering instruments, adjusting equipment, calling softly to a technician just outside the room. The door opened, footsteps approached, and within seconds the space transformed again, no longer quiet and still, but alive with motion, with purpose. Controlled, focused, every action measured. Caleb stepped back only when asked, reluctantly, his hand lingering on Rex until the last possible second. As he moved aside, Rex's eyes opened slightly, just a fraction, enough for that amber gaze to meet his once more. It was not strong, not clear, but it was there. And in that brief connection, Caleb saw it again. Not fear. Not surrender. Trust. The kind that had carried them through years of work, long nights, uncertain calls, moments where instinct mattered more than anything else. The kind of trust that said, without words, "I am still here." The lights above brightened slightly as the team prepared, casting sharper edges across the room, turning shadows into clarity. Dr. Carter glanced once more at the screen, then back at Rex, her voice calm, decisive. "We have a window," she said. "And he has already done the hardest part." Caleb stood just beyond the table, watching, his hands now empty but his presence unwavering, every part of him still anchored to the dog who refused to let go. And as the room shifted fully into motion, into action, into something that felt almost like a second chance, the silence that had once carried goodbye was replaced by something else entirely. Something quieter. Something stronger. A beginning they had almost missed. The room moved with quiet intensity. Every motion deliberate, every sound softened beneath the weight of what was at stake. Stainless steel instruments were arranged with care, monitors adjusted, soft beeps now steady and purposeful instead of fading. Dr. Emily Carter stood at the center of it all, her focus absolute, hands steady as she guided the team through each step. This was no longer about preparing for loss. This was about precision, timing, and the fragile space between seconds where something could still be changed. Caleb Hayes stood just outside the immediate circle, close enough to see every movement, far enough to not interfere. His hands rested at his sides, but they felt empty without the weight of Rex beneath them. He had spent years reading the smallest shifts in that dog's body, the subtle cues others would miss, and now he was forced to stand still, to trust someone else to see what he could not. The seconds stretched differently here. Not slow, not fast, just heavy. Each one carrying consequence. He watched as Dr. Carter leaned in, her voice calm but firm as she guided the procedure forward, identifying the exact point where the obstruction pressed, where it disrupted the natural rhythm that should have been there all along. It was small. So small it could have been dismissed. But it had nearly taken everything. Rex lay still, his body relaxed now under careful monitoring, the tension that had once gripped him replaced by something quieter, something more stable. The rise and fall of his chest became more consistent, subtle but unmistakable. Caleb noticed it first. Not because he was closest, but because he had spent years knowing what normal looked like for Rex. "That is better," he whispered, almost afraid to say it out loud. Dr. Carter did not look up, but a faint nod confirmed she saw it too. "He is responding," she said, her voice even, controlled, but carrying a thread of relief beneath the surface. The team adjusted around her, small movements, coordinated, practiced, each person playing a part in something that felt larger than any one of them. The monitors reflected the change in real time, numbers stabilizing, patterns returning to something closer to what they should be. It was not dramatic. It was not sudden. It was quiet. A slow return, like a tide shifting direction almost too gently to notice unless you were watching closely. Caleb exhaled slowly, his shoulders lowering another inch, tension loosening piece by piece. He had prepared himself for a different ending when he walked into this building. He had rehearsed the words, the silence, the drive home alone. But this This was something he had not allowed himself to imagine. A second chance did not arrive with noise. It arrived like this. Quiet. Fragile. Earned. Rex's paw twitched once against the table, a small movement, barely there, but enough to draw Caleb's eyes immediately. It was instinct. Recognition. The kind of signal only a partner would understand. I am here, Caleb said softly, stepping just a little closer, careful not to cross the line he had been given. His voice did not waver this time. It carried something steadier now. Something grounded. Dr. Carter finished the final adjustment, her hands slowing as the critical moment passed, her posture easing just slightly. She looked at the monitor, then at Rex, then finally at Caleb. For a brief second, the room held still again. Not with fear. Not with uncertainty. But with something quieter. Confirmation. He is through the worst of it, she said. The words did not echo. They settled. Caleb closed his eyes for just a moment, letting them sink in, letting the weight shift inside him. When he opened them again, he did not look at the machines. He looked at Rex. And for the first time since this began, the future did not feel like something slipping away. It felt like something returning, one breath at a time. The room slowly exhaled, the tension that had once gripped every corner now easing into something quieter, something steadier, like a storm that had passed but left the air changed. The machines continued their soft rhythm, no longer a countdown, but a measure of life returning, one consistent beat at a time. Rex lay still on the table, but the stillness was different now. It was not emptiness. It was rest. His breathing had deepened, each rise of his chest more certain than the last, as if his body had finally found its way back to a rhythm it had been fighting to remember. Caleb Hayes stepped closer, drawn not by urgency this time, but by something gentler, something that felt like recognition. He reached out slowly, his hand finding its place along Rex's neck again, fingers pressing lightly into the familiar warmth. "You stubborn old partner," he whispered, his voice softer now, touched with something close to disbelief. Rex's ear flicked faintly at the sound, a small movement, but enough to pull a quiet breath from Caleb's chest. It was real. Not imagined. Not hoped for. Real. Dr. Emily Carter removed her gloves carefully, her movements slower now, the sharp edge of urgency replaced by measured calm. She glanced at the monitor one more time, confirming what her instincts had already told her. Stable. Not perfect. Not fully recovered. But stable enough to hold on. "He is going to need time," she said, her voice steady, grounded in truth rather than promise. "Careful monitoring, rest, and follow-up treatment. But he is here." Caleb nodded, though the words took a moment to fully settle. Time. It was something he had not expected to be given again. Something he had almost lost without realizing how close it had been. He looked down at Rex, studying the subtle changes, the way his chest rose more evenly now, the way his body no longer fought itself. "You hear that?" Caleb murmured, leaning slightly closer. "We have time." Rex's eyes shifted beneath closed lids, a faint movement, as if the words reached him somewhere deeper than sound. The room around them began to return to its ordinary shape. Instruments were cleared, monitors adjusted, quiet conversations exchanged between staff members who had just witnessed something rare but chose not to make it loud. There was no celebration. No raised voices. Just a shared understanding that something had almost been missed, and somehow, had not been. Caleb stayed where he was, unwilling to step away, his presence anchored beside Rex as if distance itself had become something fragile. He remembered the weight of that earlier moment, the stillness that had almost taken everything, and the way Rex had reached for him, not with strength, but with intention. That memory did not fade. It settled deeper, heavier, not as pain, but as something that would stay. Dr. Carter moved to his side, her posture relaxed now, though her eyes still carried the focus of someone who knew how close things had come. "You did something important," she said quietly, not looking at him directly, but at Rex. Caleb frowned slightly, confusion flickering across his face. "I just stayed," he replied. Dr. Carter shook her head gently. You listened, she said. Most people would have let the moment pass. You did not. Caleb looked down at Rex again, his hand resting steady, grounding, remembering every second of that embrace, every instinct that told him something was not right. He did not feel like he had done anything extraordinary. He had just trusted what he knew. Trusted him. Rex shifted again, just enough for his head to tilt slightly toward Caleb's hand, a quiet, familiar gesture that needed no explanation. Caleb smiled faintly, the kind of smile that carried relief and something deeper, something earned. Outside the room, the world continued as it always did, unaware of how close one life had come to slipping away, unaware of the quiet moment that had changed everything. But inside, in that soft hum of machines and low light, something had shifted. Not dramatic. Not loud. Just enough. Enough to turn an ending into something else entirely. Something still unfolding. The hours that followed did not announce themselves with anything dramatic, no sudden shift, no visible line between danger and safety, only a slow unfolding of time where each minute felt earned rather than given. The clinic had grown quieter as the night deepened, the sharp brightness of earlier replaced by softer overhead lights that cast long, gentle shadows across the floor. Outside, the world moved on, cars passing, distant city sounds fading in and out, but inside that room, everything revolved around the steady rhythm of one recovering life. Caleb Hayes sat in a chair pulled close beside the recovery table, his posture slightly slouched now, exhaustion settling into his shoulders, but his hand never leaving Rex. It rested there, firm and constant, fingers occasionally shifting just enough to reassure himself that the warmth was still real. Rex lay on a padded surface now, no longer on cold steel, his body supported, breathing deeper, more even, as if each breath was relearning its place. The monitors continued their quiet song, soft beeps marking a rhythm that Caleb had begun to trust. Every so often, Rex's chest would rise a little stronger, a little fuller, and Caleb would notice, because he noticed everything when it came to him. You always did things your own way, Caleb murmured, his voice low, the words drifting into the quiet like a memory spoken out loud. His thumb brushed lightly along the line of Rex's jaw, tracing a path he had followed countless times before, after long shifts, after training days, after moments where no words were needed. The bond between them had never required explanation. It had been built in silence, in shared purpose, in trust that did not need to be questioned. Now, in this quiet room, that same bond felt heavier, deeper, shaped by what had almost been lost. Dr. Emily Carter entered softly, her footsteps barely making a sound against the floor. She carried a small clipboard, though her eyes moved first to Rex, checking without needing to ask. The subtle rise and fall, the steady readings, the absence of strain. She nodded faintly, more to herself than to Caleb. He is holding steady, she said, her voice gentle, matching the calm of the room. Caleb looked up briefly, offering a small nod in return, but his attention drifted back almost immediately. He always does, he replied, not as a challenge, but as a quiet truth he had learned over years. Dr. Carter studied him for a moment, seeing not just a handler, but a man who had built his life around reading signals others would overlook. You were right to pause, she said after a moment. That instinct you followed, it made the difference. Caleb let out a slow breath, his gaze fixed on Rex. It was not instinct, he said softly. It was him. The words settled between them, simple but complete. Rex shifted slightly then, a faint movement of his front leg, the smallest of gestures, but it carried intention. Caleb straightened instantly, leaning in just a little closer. Easy, he whispered, his voice steady, grounding. Rex's eyes fluttered beneath closed lids, then slowly, carefully, they opened. Not fully. Just enough. The amber color returned in a soft, unfocused glow, searching, adjusting, finding. And then they found him. Caleb did not move. He did not need to. The connection held, silent and immediate, as if no time had passed, as if the space between them had never existed. Rex's gaze lingered, not with confusion, not with fear, but with something familiar. Recognition. Trust. A quiet question answered without words. Caleb's breath caught, his hand pressing slightly firmer against Rex's neck, not to hold him there, but to anchor himself to the moment. "Hey," he said, the word barely above a whisper, but filled with everything he could not say. Rex blinked slowly, his head shifting just enough to lean into Caleb's hand, the movement weak but deliberate. It was enough. More than enough. Dr. Carter watched from a short distance, her expression calm, but her eyes reflecting the weight of what she was witnessing. Not just recovery. Not just a successful intervention. Something quieter. Something that could not be measured on a screen. The room remained still, the machine steady, the night continuing its slow passage beyond the walls, but inside, something had settled into place. Not an ending. Not even a victory. Just a quiet return. A bond that had been tested, held, and now, without needing to say it, had found its way back to where it belonged. The hours that followed did not announce themselves with anything dramatic, no sudden shift, no visible line between danger and safety, only a slow unfolding of time where each minute felt earned rather than given. The clinic had grown quieter as the night deepened, the sharp brightness of earlier replaced by softer overhead lights that cast long, gentle shadows across the floor. Outside, the world moved on, cars passing, distant city sounds fading in and out, but inside that room, everything revolved around the steady rhythm of one recovering life. Caleb Hayes sat in a chair pulled close beside the recovery table, his posture slightly slouched now, exhaustion settling into his shoulders, but his hand never leaving Rex. It rested there, firm and constant, fingers occasionally shifting just enough to reassure himself that the warmth was still real. Rex lay on a padded surface now, no longer on cold steel, his body supported, breathing deeper, more even, as if each breath was relearning its place. The monitors continued their quiet song, soft beeps marking a rhythm that Caleb had begun to trust. Every so often, Rex's chest would rise a little stronger, a little fuller, and Caleb would notice, because he noticed everything when it came to him. "You always did things your own way," Caleb murmured, his voice low, the words drifting into the quiet like a memory spoken out loud. His thumb brushed lightly along the line of Rex's jaw, tracing a path he had followed countless times before, after long shifts, after training days, after moments where no words were needed. The bond between them had never required explanation. It had been built in silence, in shared purpose, in trust that did not need to be questioned. Now, in this quiet room, that same bond felt heavier, deeper, shaped by what had almost been lost. Dr. Emily Carter entered softly, her footsteps barely making a sound against the floor. She carried a small clipboard, though her eyes moved first to Rex, checking without needing to ask. The subtle rise and fall, the steady readings, the absence of strain. She nodded faintly, more to herself than to Caleb. "He is holding steady," she said, her voice gentle, matching the calm of the room. Caleb looked up briefly, offering a small nod in return, but his attention drifted back almost immediately. "He always does," he replied, not as a challenge, but as a quiet truth he had learned over years. Dr. Carter studied him for a moment, seeing not just a handler, but a man who had built his life around reading signals others would overlook. "You were right to pause," she said after a moment. "That instinct you followed, it made the difference." Caleb let out a slow breath, his gaze fixed on Rex. "It was not instinct," he said softly. "It was him." The words settled between them, simple but complete. Rex shifted slightly then, a faint movement of his front leg, the smallest of gestures, but it carried intention. Caleb straightened instantly, leaning in just a little closer. "Easy," he whispered, his voice steady, grounding. Rex's eyes fluttered beneath closed lids, then slowly, carefully, they opened. Not fully. Just enough. The amber color returned in a soft, unfocused glow, searching, adjusting, finding. And then they found him. Caleb did not move. He did not need to. The connection held, silent and immediate, as if no time had passed, as if the space between them had never existed. Rex's gaze lingered, not with confusion, not with fear, but with something familiar. Recognition. Trust. A quiet question answered without words. Caleb's breath caught, his hand pressing slightly firmer against Rex's neck, not to hold him there, but to anchor himself to the moment. "Hey," he said, the word barely above a whisper, but filled with everything he could not say. Rex blinked slowly, his head shifting just enough to lean into Caleb's hand, the movement weak but deliberate. It was enough. More than enough. Dr. Carter watched from a short distance, her expression calm, but her eyes reflecting the weight of what she was witnessing. Not just recovery. Not just a successful intervention. Something quieter. Something that could not be measured on a screen. The room remained still, the machine steady, the night continuing its slow passage beyond the walls, but inside, something had settled into place. Not an ending. Not even a victory. Just a quiet return. A bond that had been tested, held, and now, without needing to say it, had found its way back to where it belonged. The second day did not rush anything, and somehow that was exactly what made it feel like a gift. Time no longer pressed against the walls of the room with urgency. It moved slower now, softer, as if even the hours understood they had been given back when they were almost taken away. Sunlight filtered through the window in longer stretches, warming the sterile edges of the clinic, turning cold surfaces into something almost human. Caleb Hayes sat in the same chair, but his posture had changed. He no longer leaned forward with tension. He rested there, grounded, present, his hand still placed gently against Rex as it had been since the beginning. Only now, it was not to hold on. It was simply to be there. Rex lay beside him, stronger than the day before, though still quiet, still healing. His breathing had settled into a rhythm that felt natural again, no longer forced, no longer uneven. Every now and then, his tail gave a faint, slow movement against the padding, not energetic, not playful, but enough to show something inside him had returned. Caleb noticed every one of those movements. He always had. "You always come back your way," Caleb said softly, a hint of warmth in his voice, the kind that had been absent the night before. Rex turned his head slightly at the sound, his amber eyes clearer now, more focused, resting on Caleb with that same steady recognition. It was not dramatic. There was no sudden burst of energy, no moment where everything changed at once. It was quieter than that. More honest. A slow rebuilding of strength, breath by breath, second by second. Dr. Emily Carter entered later that afternoon, carrying a small file, her expression calm, but lighter than before. She paused for a moment at the door, taking in the scene without interrupting. There was something different about it now. Not relief exactly, but a kind of peace that had settled in where fear once lived. "He is making progress," she said, stepping closer, her voice carrying quiet certainty. Caleb looked up, nodding once. "He always had a habit of surprising people," he replied. Dr. Carter allowed a small smile at that, though her eyes remained focused, observant, as she checked the readings, listened, confirmed what was already clear. "We will be able to discharge him soon," she said. "He will need follow-up care, rest, and time before he can return to any kind of work. But he is going to walk out of here." The words settled into the room with a weight that was different from anything before. Not heavy. Not fragile. Solid. Caleb did not respond right away. He simply looked at Rex, letting the meaning of that sink in fully, not rushing it, not questioning it. Just accepting it. "You hear that?" he said quietly, his hand brushing lightly along Rex's neck. "We are going home." Rex's ears shifted, his head lifting slightly more this time, his body responding with a little more strength, a little more intention. It was still careful, still measured, but it was there. That same quiet determination that had carried him through everything before had not left. It had only been waiting. The afternoon light stretched longer, the room growing warmer as the day moved on. Nurses passed by the doorway, glancing in with soft smiles, recognizing something without needing to say it. Not a miracle in the way people often describe. No sudden reversal, no impossible moment. Just a series of small choices. A pause. A second look. A refusal to let go too soon. Caleb leaned back slightly in his chair, for the first time allowing himself to breathe without holding anything back. His eyes moved from Rex to the window, to the light beyond it, then back again. There had been a moment, not long ago, where this would have ended differently. Where silence would have taken over and stayed. But it had not. Because of something small. Something easy to miss. Something as simple as not looking away. Rex shifted again, pressing his head gently into Caleb's hand, a gesture that felt stronger now, more certain, like a quiet confirmation of everything that had passed between them. Caleb smiled, not wide, not loud, just enough to show what words could not carry. Outside, the world continued as it always did, unaware of the narrow space where everything had nearly changed. But inside that room, something remained. Not just survival. Not just recovery. Something quieter. A bond that had been tested in silence, and answered in the smallest possible way. And as the lights slowly faded toward evening, there was no need to mark the moment, no need to define it. Because some stories do not end with a victory. They end with something far quieter. They end with the simple grace of still being there.